and I'm going to start at the beginning. I don't know how it is here in the Bible Belt, but in the 1980s in New Jersey, following Jesus was not a particularly popular thing to do. And when I got to high school, I had never been to a church before. I really didn't know anything about Jesus. But I met these two girls who had this really interesting, close relationship that I thought was very strange, because they talked about this Jesus person, they talked about strange spiritual things like prayer and reading the Bible, and somehow it mattered to them that they read the Bible. They talked about things like, what does it mean to live like a Christian? What do I do with this in my life? What does it feel like? What does it look like? How do I do that? And as a teenager, I was also looking for some kinds of meaning and purpose in my life. And I started going to church with them because they went there. And there was a youth pastor who probably had some answers to those questions that they were asking. I really don't remember what the answers were. I just remember the questioning, and I remember being impressed that they were asking these kinds of questions and that it did make a difference to them. And because of the closeness of the relationship, I said to myself, whatever that is that they have, I want some of that. And so I pursued it. And I imagine that as I was sort of minding my own business, I was a lot like the blind man in our story, who's just kind of minding his own business, and then Jesus walks over and slaps mud on his face and says, "Go and wash." And then you do that. And to be honest with you, I don't remember that moment. I don't remember having some kind of specific day or time that I suddenly said, yes, I want to do this. But I know that I did it because my life changed, and suddenly different things were important to me. And the combination of adolescent argumentativeness and the zealousness of your first encounter with Jesus and this odd spiritual interest, life got sort of more complicated. And I remember one day I was arguing with some students in my class, and I said, there's a blue car outside the window, and if you believe me or not, it doesn't matter to the existence of the car whether you believe me that it's out there or not. Right? This was my first brilliant foray into Christian apologetics. Right? Yeah. I didn't have a whole lot to go on. But I did what I could. And I tried my best. Whatever it was that I had encountered that had changed me made a difference to my life, and I started talking about it. And I knew I believed in it, and it had given me a purpose in my life. So I want to ask you to reflect for a minute on the early days of your faith. I mean, do you remember how exciting it was? Everything was new. Everything was, oh, I get it. That's exciting. And of course, sometimes you get busy and God kind of gets put on a shelf. And then you still have sort of this nagging question. Really, what is my purpose? Why am I here? And what did God have to do with that? It's sort of the human quest. And I myself figured, if this God of the Bible is real, then how can I do anything else with my life but serve God? And a friend that I told that to told me that it sounded like I was running away from a call to ministry. And I was like, what? No way. That is not what I'm doing. I'm a woman. I'm, this or that or blah, blah, blah. I said, how can I really fill that call to ministry? And I said, I'm a woman. I marry a minister. So I did. I married a minister. That worked out great most of the time until it didn't. And then I found myself facing divorce. And I had to reevaluate, who is this God that I serve? What does God want me to do, and how can my life still reflect God considering my circumstances? Here I am trying to live my life, and Jesus comes by and slaps on that mud, wet, messy, and says, go and wash. So it changed me again. And my community didn't like that very much. They no longer recognized me as one of their own, and they brought me before the Pharisees. Actually, it was called the Office of Student Affairs, but it's really kind of the same thing. And give glory to God, they said. Explain your behavior. You don't fit in with our theology. But I refused to do that. And I had been told to go and wash, and it had changed me. And I could not unwash. They suspended me. The church that I was going to told me I could come, but I couldn't lead. I couldn't serve. And I said, well, why does it matter? What's the point? I had been told to go and wash. What do I do with that? And I had refused to give up on what I had discovered about God. And sometimes the ways that we encounter Jesus, they don't fit the mold, and it doesn't go over very well. We claim that God did something different in us, or through us, or with us, or around us. Now you all are in seminary, so I'm specifically talking to you. You're not your average run-of-the-mill church-going Jesus follower, right? You're here because you have been called to do something. You felt that warm, oozing mud dripping down your face, and you heard the voice of God saying, go and wash. And not just anywhere, right? Jesus told the blind man to wash at Siloam, which means you, the one who is sent. You, the one who are sent. You are sent by God to be a living demonstration of your experience with Jesus. So depending where you are in your faith right now, that may look different. You may have more questions and fewer answers. You may still be fighting with the Pharisees in the synagogue about where you fit in or not. You might simply be proclaiming, I believe, here it is. Or maybe you're saying, I don't know what's going on. All I know is I had this experience, Jesus did this thing, and that's all I can do is say that. It doesn't sit well with other people when we go and wash. Here's a sampling of some things that people have said to me in the last month about my call to ministry. Are you sure that's what you really want to do? Ministers have to go to school? I thought they were just salesmen. Here's my favorite. It's a joke for you to be a minister. Now, happily, that last one didn't come from the ordination board. It came from my ex-husband, but that's another story. I don't imagine that ministry gets any easier once we've been ordained. In fact, I imagine it gets a lot harder. But remember that you are sent by God. The scary part, I think, comes when it appears that the hassle and the trouble of being that demonstration of God in the world seems like it's not worth it anymore. It's too much hassle. We're beaten. We're burnt out. We're overwhelmed by the enormity of the brokenness in the world and the helplessness that we feel trying to meet the needs of the people. But I take comfort in the story of a formerly blind man. Right? He's not given a charge to go out and fix everything in the world. He's told to go and wash himself. He is sent, and he cannot unwash. Washing has changed him, and his life is now a living testimony. Not to the full glory and grandeur of God, but to the mundane. And what does he say? This is what God did in my life. God doesn't need us to prove God's existence. God doesn't expect us to fix the whole world, even though we're going to try. How many times did the formerly blind man give a theological treatise? 0, unless you count the labels he gave Jesus. How many times did he tell the story of what God did in someone else's life? Like Lazarus being raised from the dead, or the lame man being able to walk again? 0. How many times did he have all the answers to all the questions that were asked of him? Pretty close to 0. But he was asked to tell his story over and over again, 3 times I counted. 2 of them to the same group of people, and they didn't listen to him either time. So before he had a story to tell, this man had nothing to say. And even when he had a story, people didn't really listen to him. And when he finally got their attention, did they say to him, "Oh, thank you for telling us about God"? No, they turned him in, right? They took him to the people who were going to reprimand him for his unfitting behavior. And did they listen? No. But interestingly, they didn't debate the veracity of his story or the truth of his story. What they were concerned about were the consequences of his claim. What does it mean if we believe this guy's story? I have 3 older brothers. I know that explains a lot. The middle brother is an alcoholic. When we talk about Jesus, it's not that he doesn't believe what Jesus has done in my life or that I've had some experience of God. But he says he doesn't want to change his life. Because he knows if he decides to follow Jesus, that's going to make a difference. Jesus is going to ask him to do some things that he doesn't want to do. It requires something from him that he's not willing to give. He gets it. He knows that when Jesus tells you to go and wash, it requires action on your part. You become unrecognizable to your neighbors. You're rejected by those whom you once admired. You're brought to the carpet by those who resist change. And at the end of the day, you still haven't even seen Jesus face to face. At the end of the story, after everything that the blind man had been through, Jesus says to him a very direct question: do you believe in the Son of Man? Can you hear the man's weary voice? Yeah, who is he? Who is he? I'll believe. This man's a walking billboard for the works of God. He's been constantly retelling his story, often unwillingly, and yet here he is again, another person asking him questions, prosecuting. This time the question's different. Jesus doesn't ask him what happened, like the neighbors and the Pharisees did. He asks him about the consequences of his washing. Do you believe? He asks. Did my touch change you? Did being washed and healed and given sight make you different? I sent you to reveal God to the people around you. And after all that you've been through because of me, now, do you believe? Well, we're not told any more about the formerly blind man at this point. He kind of vanishes into the mist of the story. He doesn't become an apostle or famous healer or even a great evangelist. And like so many people in the history of church who've given witness to God, they've simply faded into the background, into the mundane of life. And yet, without each and every one of those faithful followers of Jesus, we wouldn't be here, because we wouldn't have heard the witness and testimony of those who have encountered God. When we're young, we have these visions of grandeur. We're going to change the world. We're going to do all these things, make it a different place. But so many of us are just going to fade into the background when it's all over, into the mundane of life. That could be sobering. But isn't it in the mundane of life that we live and that we breathe and that we come in contact with all these other people and leave a legacy like ripples on water? Every life that we touch is changed simply because we were there, revealing God and living out and telling our stories. And when we face doubt, am I really called to this? Do I really believe? What we're asking, I think, isn't about belief so much, but about consequences. Because when we believe, it matters. We've been sent. Before he had a story to tell, this blind man was voiceless. But along with his sight, he was given a story and gradually the voice to tell it with greater understanding. And so have you. So go, you who are sent. Reveal God. Tell of your encounter with Jesus. Others will taste and see that the Lord is good because you were there. You asked the questions. You faced the consequences of faith. People will see God in you. And whether they know it yet or not, they want some of that. Let's pray together. Should I actually pray, or can I just acknowledge that I would pray at that point?
That's fine if you want to call it right there.
Okay, because I didn't write one out.
Good job.
What do we got? 13:05.
Okay.